Welcome in, viewers. This is the Come Get Some show. I'm your host, Blake Williams, here with Mr. Come Get Some himself, Gregg Williams. We have another victory week after another big-time AFC North Come Get Some victory battle. I know everybody's excited about that out there. One thing we want to talk about real quick, otherwise we would be remiss, is saying prayers up to our man Rodney McLeod, who we had on the show last week. I think the viewers know how we feel about him, and got a chance to see him a little bit. But tore his bicep, yesterday, got announced on that. And you and I are both. We were actually here, at the studios, here at the Big Play Studios, watching the game, so we couldn't, rewind it and like we normally would, but we just both looked at each other because we know the body language of him, and he did this. When you've been around a guy long enough, you see, and he's a tough dude, but he did this little kind of like, chopping. I'm done. I'm
done.
Something's off.
Yep.
Like I'm done.
Yep.
Sort of can't go sort of situation, and so I knew. Maybe it wouldn't be something great. So we're thinking about you, Rodney. Love you. But we've got a great show for you guys today. We've got a surprise guest in here. Brad Henderson, a longtime professional Major League Baseball head athletic trainer. He's going to come in and give us an expert opinion on Deshaun Watson's injury and kind of what that rehab would look like. We've got a Browns recap. We're going to talk some big time, the Ohio State-Michigan game that is this week, and give a little Denver preview, and then do our Pay That Man as well too. But here's a new segment right here, G-Dub, because we know like you always like to give your 2 cents, always pipe in, but like it's inflation, right? So we're gonna go 3 cents. All right. What are your 3 cents? Give us your 3 cents on yesterday's game.
So you're going to actually let me voice my opinion and turn them into cents, or what?
Nobody has to let you voice your opinion.
That is very good.
You are going to vociferously voice your opinion.
You don't got to hear, you get to hear.
What.
That's exactly right. Well, here's the deal. 3 top things I saw in that ball game, which made me proud as all get out. Number one, I thought the defense was dominant, and the defense was dominant, had a couple of explosive plays, but kept their head down and kept working. Number two, I thought that our third down dominance on defense was because, and it's fun for me to see somebody else that can finally figure that out, like Jim Schwartz, on understanding how you have to manage the first downs and the second downs and get them into your optimum third downs to be able to have more opportunity to be dominant. He did a great job with that. And then DTR, we saw quicker decisions. I thought Kevin did a really good job on making sure the game plan fit him. He did a better job of taking care of the football. And he fought through, I shake my head, how many drop passes that were out there. He didn't let that buy him down, pull him down. He kept the game plan going. He kept getting the ball out of his hands fast, protecting the football, and they were able to overcome.
I agree with you, and I saw, and you talk about the drop passes, right? And we know a lot of them were in Njoku. And you see how the way he owned up to it immediately after the game, right? And you even saw he went home. He went home and did jugs machines in the backyard and FaceTime Kevin Stefanski doing them from there. But I thought it was just big and huge. Like you said, DTR kept coming to him as well too, like not losing confidence. And the biggest one of all was the one at the end that we needed, that the huge catch to get into field goal range to kick at the end. So it was a big time team win. Like I said, we've got a big time show for you here today, and stick with us. We'll be right back with Brad after these announcements. Welcome back. It's Come Get Some. I'm your host, Blake Williams. I'm here with Mr. Come Get Some himself, Gregg Williams, and we're joined here virtually today with a longtime family friend, former longtime Major League Baseball head athletic trainer at the Pittsburgh Pirates and the St. Louis Cardinals for over 25 years, Brad Henderson. Thank you, Brad, for joining us today.
I really appreciate it. How you guys doing?
We're doing well. We're doing well up here in Cleveland.
What would you have ever thought about me all of a sudden being on a podcast or a TV show, and then also doing it with my son, who kind of taunts and wants me to slap this, not the snot, some other part of a body out of him. And so I'm just trying to do these things week by week.
Right. I wish I could have got $1 in Vegas on this, because I gotta be a rich man right now.
No doubt.
Well, they don't get too froggy, old man, because then we have to send you to Brad for some PT.
There we go.
Yep, absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
thank you, Brad, for joining us today. Obviously, the kind of the big hot button, up here in Cleveland and kind of all over the NFL world, in this past week has been the Deshaun Watson news and kind of what's going on with his shoulder. And so, kind of the first question, I wanted to ask you, because even as a longtime, athlete and coach and whatnot, I mean, I wasn't even, really, aware of what it was. But what exactly is this injury? What is a displaced fracture of the glenoid? What is it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if we get back and really talk about some just real basic anatomy, the scapular, the wing bone that everybody's real familiar with, at the end of that is the glenoid, which is a pear-shaped structure that the head of the humerus articulates with. So when we think about this structure, it's only about a third of the size of the articular head of the humerus. So when we get into the bony part of this, when we talk about a displaced fracture, it's a bony Bankart. So not only have we chipped away some of the glenoid or this articulating structure, but we've also affected the labrum, which is a cartilage ring that goes around the glenoid that kind of helps deepen the fossa. So when we talk about a labral tear, a lot of times we talk about the tire being off the rim. Mm-hmm. So if we can think about that a little bit on how that would affect the stability of our shoulder joint with the tire somewhat being off the rim. Another analogy, if there's any golfers out there, try to place a golf ball on a tee that's been chipped and has lost about 25% of the face of the tee. It's just not going to stay on there. Mm-hmm. So when we think about what the shoulder has to do when we get in this position and to be able to articulate in internal and external rotation, missing 20 to 25% of this articulating structure is a real concern.
Brad, that is a great example that you just put on there about the golf ball on a broken golf tee and everything. And it should tell everybody a lot about there's no way that ball is going to sit there. And again, I've had all kinds of shoulder injuries growing up and stuff as a quarterback and a pitcher and that kind of stuff. And that, I wish there had been more understanding in the old days about this type of stuff right here. But you see for sure now, there's no way he could play. And the fact that he played the second half with that injury that occurred in the first half, how tough he is, and was be able to go through that, and but we're not going to be able to do that unless there's surgery needed.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. And I was reading about his ankle situation, and then the shoulder situation he had a few weeks ago, and then you tack on this one. This guy must be an absolute warrior to be able to go out there and want to continue to go out there and play with his team. So. Back in the old baseball days, we called these guys gamers, and I don't know what a better compliment I could give somebody like this other than referring to them as a true gamer.
I mean, have you ever seen anything like that in terms of you were talking about professional thrower, so a quarterback, a pitcher in their throwing arm, playing half a game, or so, doing it, and in that particular game, right? So after he did the hurt shoulder, he went 14 for 14, and led him back in a comeback, after that. I mean, have you ever seen anything like that, before?
No, that's really truly amazing, and of course, what you guys go through compared to what our baseball guys went through, obviously just, very high demands in very different arenas. With the baseball shoulder, you don't see a one pitch type injure somebody like a tackle or, mm-hmm. An outstretched arm or something like that would be a one specific type thing. Most of the times our guys, it's accumulation of these thousands of throws they make that gets these labral tears and kind of gets the tire off the rim, as I alluded to.
I think that was really good too that you alluded to him as you called him a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what I've always referred to him at this level is this guy's a true gladiator. This is a guy that know he's gonna finish whatever battle he's in, and it shows everybody how tough Deshaun Watson is.
No doubt.
Yeah,
and you talk about the tire, coming off the rim. And so how do we put that back on? I mean, how do you guys put that back on? What's the surgical procedure like for something like this? And what's the rehab like for something like this?
Well, depending on, what all has been injured. And again, having been on the inside of this thing, there's a certain amount of information that you put out there, but again, I don't want to be comparing apples to oranges kind of thing, So, if it's truly just part of the glenoid where he's knocked, part of this off, does this fracture go on into the body of the scapula, would require plates and screws and those kind of things? Or are we more talking, out toward the edge of the glenoid where just the end piece got knocked off and we can go back and put this kind of corner back on to give him a good articulated surface to be able to get back up and throw again. So the plates and screws for the labral or for the scapular fracture, and then they use what they call suture anchors to put the labrum back on or the tire back on the rim. So they screw down in, they'll take the sutures over top of it and literally tie this down here to get the labrum back on the glenoid there.
So for a thrower, right? That I don't know. I imagine that would probably be something different, or not different, but maybe a little bit longer in the rehab process. But what we say, like for a thrower. And again, not knowing all of the basics on, is it just the tip, or is it the the whole scapular region as well too? What would you say the maybe short end to long end rehab and process that he has to look at?
Yeah, well, I mean, and you guys have been around the training room and that kind of thing. So, he'll have a couple weeks in a sling, and then we'll start working on some motion and the other injury that he had that was described as a subscap injury. So is there anything else that they're going to have to kind of clean up, touch up when they're in there? Again, as we talked about this guy being a gladiator and a warrior, I mean, he's been around for a number of years. His parts got a little wear and tear on them. So they're going to fluff and buff this thing to make it look as good as possible. So when we talk about these types of surgeries and rehabs and those kind of things, you get into the real basic stuff. You start moving your shoulder, then you got to make sure the scap moves. We got to get into some strength, and we got to get into endurance, and then we get into plyometrics. Then we kind of get the ball in hand and kind of put them on a throwing program to get back out there. So I think 4 to 6 months is a pretty good timetable. I looked up OTAs are going to be about the end of May for y'all. And so I think that right now, with the information we have, I think that this is a realistic goal that he can be ready to perform at some level on OTAs. And again, he's got the ankle and that kind of thing as well.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, if anything, if him being back by mini camps or even coming back by training camps in late July, that would be huge for him and huge for the team. But thank you very much, Brad, for joining us today and giving us your expert insight. We appreciate you guys. Please stay right here with us, and we'll be back right after these announcements.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it. Really
Thank
do.
you. And for the Buckeyes out there, go Bucks, OH.
Yeah,
that's
big
right.
weekend.
It's coming up there.
Big weekend.
And make sure you tell the family that we went through the whole piece without me having one cuss word.
I'll let them know.
All right.
Take care, my man.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate
Thank you.
And stick with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Come Get Some. It is a victory game recap. We love having the victory game recaps. And so I want to start out talking about this. And I know a lot of people were kind of, maybe lamenting certain aspects of the offense yesterday and whatnot. But I saw a beautiful, and I know you and I were watching together here at Big Play Studios, and we saw a beautiful chess match, between two chess masters in Kevin Stefanski and Mike Tomlin. in the strategies that they were trying to do yesterday that were very similar. And so talk a little bit about, from your standpoint, as a former head coach, what you saw from those two yesterday and what they were trying to do in team complementary game plans.
You know, making it as simple as possible, because as we watch, and you and I watch, and all these other games when there's head coaches out there, there's coordinators out there that don't have a clue. Okay, unless it's on their magazine, whatever they're reading, I have no idea. Whatever they're wiping with, okay, it ain't working. I thought Mike and Kevin did a fantastic job of making the management of their quarterbacks the most primary thing that had to happen. Okay, and they had to manage their quarterbacks in a way that their defenses now got a chance to play. Their special teams now got a chance to affect field position. I hadn't seen a whole lot of that out of Kevin before, to be quite honest, and I really believe that was one of the best games I've watched him do, managing that, and which coach was going to not do a good enough job and have his quarterback lose the game for him. Okay, and they did a great job of that, both those guys together.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, the chess match was, in our opinion, watching it, was what is try to make the other team's quarterback lose the game, and vice versa. Do that by not allowing your quarterback to be the difference that in win or losing it for the other 52. And both teams similarly built in a lot of ways. And hey, who could better do that, right? Because in one of those games where points are going to be at a premium, you know, all it takes is that one sack forced fumble, that one pick six, that one thing that you know is probably going to come if you try to run the way that maybe everybody else is running it in a perfect scenario, which neither teams were in perfect scenarios, but had a lot of great things.
And you know what, Mike, that's how they've won their games this year. He's been doing that week in and week out. That's how he did it.
Talking about that was the next thing, you know, that we see, and I know a lot of people are sitting there talking about the edge, and I'll talk about this a little bit. And it was a lot of it had to do with the edge rushers, right? TJ Watt and Highsmith. All right, they are one play away. All right, so the structure that you saw with the offense yesterday is Kevin knew that they're one play away at any given time of a sack, forced fumble, return for a touchdown. They have, and that's how they've been winning all year long.
That's
doing
how
those
the Steelers have been doing it,
right? When you see the stats that the Steelers may do on any given week, you're like, how did they win that game? Well, because they had a fourth quarter sack, forced fumble, return for a touchdown or something like that, and then you can't overcome those in a points or premium type of game. But we talked a lot about, and I've seen a lot about out there about how TJ Watt's stats were in such a bad PFF game and whatnot. I'll be honest with you, it came down to when our rookie right tackle was actually out there, he did really well versus him.
He did really well.
He wasn't out there for the whole day, right? And then DTR getting the ball out of his hand really quickly, which you've already mentioned, which was a Kevin thing. But because when our rookie right tackle wasn't out there, the other people that were there were dumping. I mean, it was a race to DTR was getting hit. They were dumping the tackles on DTR. Some of those errant throws that you saw were because TJ Watt was contacting his throwing arm, either himself or with throwing the tackle's body on the follow
DTR's teammate.
With TTR's teammate. I mean, we were holding our breath, and so. Yeah, I mean, you could say, hey, we got to open the offense up. We got to do it. Hey, not that week versus that team. Nope. Every single week is a different game plan, we'd say, right? Yep. And that brings me to this point. And I think you can attest to this. We've been laughing, seeing some people out there. We shake our head. I mean, we've been seeing people out there, fan bases out there say, oh, it's so hard to be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Oh, it's so hard right now to be a New England Patriots fan. Oh, it's so hard to be a Green Bay Packers fan. It's like, are you kidding me?
Are you actually kidding me? You're talking about these franchises that are legendary?
Yeah, and so what I say is, a couple weeks ago I said relax, right? And Aaron Rodgers, thing I say, don't be bougie, right now, which is there's no such thing as aesthetic wins in the NFL. You win how you have to win by any means necessary, week in, week out. And that strategy may change from week to week, right? And so let's not worry about some of the stats, the points, 13 to 10. We had more. We had one more point. That's what matters. But I mean, here are some stats that we need to think about, that you need to, recognize the way that our team's built, all right, and that we need to be rejoicing on. Number 1 defense in the league. Number 1 special teams in the league, which I don't think a lot of people out there.
And a lot of people don't know that.
The special teams aren't getting the pub
I know.
that the defense is, right? I mean, Dustin Hopkins is on pace to shatter Jim Brown's longtime single-season scoring record by more than 30 points, right? Shatter it. I mean, that's amazing. We see what he's doing. But Corey Bjork is on pace to set the franchise record for net punting average or gross punting average as well too.
Field position.
And then when you talk about our long snapper, I mean, we've literally got a long snapper, a punter, and a kicker, a place kicker playing at Pro Bowl level.
No doubt.
We've got the best 3 operations right there in special teams in the entire league, right? And we got the number 2 rushing offense in the league. But we lead the league in turnovers. And what you and I have been saying right now
Constantly.
up here is the way this team is built right now is if they end every single offensive drive with a kick. Either a punt or an attempted field goal or a kickoff after a score, then this is going to be a very, 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 very hard team to beat.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%, and make them have to drive the field on this defense, and not when you don't end with a kick and all of a sudden it's a short field because of the presence you allowed on the field to your defense to go in. Okay, there's no sense in that. Okay, you got to continue to do that with our offense.
Well, speaking of our defense, right, and you would be able to attest to this, where would you rank this defense historically?
Well, we've had the opportunity, and Jim and I have had the opportunity to coach in some big ones before, and I'd rate it, in the top 10, maybe down in the top 7 or 8, in the league right now. We had the luxury of being on the all-time number 2, still the all-time number 2 defense back in the 2000 Titans, and only the 85 Bears was the only one that statistically that showed up better than we did. But this defense, as it continues to go the way it is in the fashion it is going down the stretch, has a chance to be in that top 6, 7, 8 of all time.
I agree with you, and you touched slightly on this point right there, but I think it's an important point, which is we're 10 games in. So it's not about where you're at; it's about where you finish.
It's
you kept saying, "Hey, it's where you finish," and that's where you're remembered. It's where you finish in not only December, but it's really where you finish in January and even February. Because you talked about, I don't think a lot of people even realize, right? Is you talked about, everybody talks about the 2000 Ravens. But you, as the coordinator, and Jim Schwartz, as the linebacker coach, actually had the number 1 defense in the NFL that year. The Ravens were number 2. So as dominant as they were statistically, they were number 2 in all of those categories, to you guys. But what happened is, and you guys won the division. They were a wild card team, but it come the playoffs. Right, they blocked a field goal and returned it
90-yard
returned it for a touchdown, and then they had that Ray Lewis had that interception,
52-yard interception return
off of Eddie George's back, and so they scored 2. You guys held them like 160 yards,
167 yards that day, and gave up a field goal and 1 touchdown. That's it.
But they won the game, and they went on to win, and they're remembered as this great defense. And so I think that's a big part of it, is how you finish. Well, here's a hot button topic that I want to get your take on, all right? Because obviously across the NFL, right, the Myles Garrett versus T.J. Watt debate, and so. I think it's kind of funny because you've already proven it once, right? Like you've proven it once, but who's better and who are you taking if you're drafting him?
Myles Garrett, and I'm going to take him. I've already had arguments over there, and on TJ can go ahead and be on the same team with the guy they were trying to force down our throats here with Mitch Trubisky at the time.
No doubt.
But listen to me.
Hey, he's a dominant player. He's a dominant player.
Flat play, because we loved him when he was coming out, and we're fighting for him at the right spot and everything here. But Myles Garrett, I'm very proud of him, and that's who I'd take.
I wholeheartedly agree with you right now. Like if I was building the defense around one of the two, that's who I'd be building the defense around. I'd take Myles Garrett again. He's playing dominant defensive player of the year type play.
And I hope he's listening to that. I'm actually seeing him play the run every once in a while. Pretty daggone good.
He wants to win.
He wants to win.
He wants to win. It's his idea.
And he wants to get them in a pass situation so now he can go and affect the game.
Well, please stay right with us. When we get back, we're going to talk the big Ohio State and Michigan game this week. We'll be right back after these ads. Welcome back to Come Get Some. I'm your host, Blake Williams, here with Mr. Come Get Some himself, Gregg Williams. I know it's been a long time since you've been coaching college ball in the old run and shoot days when I was a little 3-year-old running around, and back when Andre Ware was the Heisman Trophy winner at the University of Houston way back in the day. But we've got a big time, as you're aware of, game coming up this week between Ohio State and Michigan, the team up north in Ann Arbor. And I know you've been watching a bunch of both of these teams this year with me. We've been talking about it. I mean, they've got a just unbelievable wealth of NFL talent that's coming out in the draft this year from both of those two rosters. But a preview of the game this week, I think it's going to be very similar to the game that we just saw with the Browns and Steelers. And I think both teams are kind of built very similar, right? I mean, I think it's a battle of the trenches on both sides, right? I mean, Michigan's got by far and away the best offensive line in ball. They've literally won the offensive line award for multiple years now, and all those guys are back. The Zach Centers of the world and whatnot that are going to, you got Blake Corum running behind them, and then you've got the dominant defenses, right? I mean, you got the top 2 defenses in the conference. You've got both probably top 4 in the top 3 in the country. I mean, dominant defensive play. And then what you're doing though is you see both teams are kind of minimizing a little bit the quarterback situation, whether J.J. McCarthy's maybe dinged up or a little hurt, or they're just changing things up a little bit, since Harbaugh's been out, and then obviously with McCord down there, with being banged up, and so kind of that same sort of process and approach.
I think it's going to be the same kind of game. I agree with that. And you know what? As you talk about growing up, this is one of my favorite games growing up all the time by watching Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes go after it in a fist fight in a phone booth. Well, this is a kind of game that is going to have to be on managing that kind of a thing.
Yeah, you're definitely a Schembechler and Woody and Hayes kind of coach.
Probably the same kind of
from
coach.
That different
yeah, that's true.
Well, what do you think about NIL? Tell me what you think about NIL.
It'd have been nice if it had going on when I was growing up. It'd have been nice if it had been going on when you were growing up, and all of a sudden your brother Chase could have made a lot of money with all the visits that he was going on. But it's crazy as all get out. It's just another variable we have to make sure we understand to be able to compete at that level.
Well, I want to bring up something. To see if you remember an old story, right? So I was a senior in high school. All right, back over 20 years ago, writing a research paper for AP English, and my thesis was on that they needed to pay college players, and I was following you around at the office, right? And I was saying,
where was the office?
At the Bills. You were the head coach at the Bills.
I know, I'm just kidding.
And we came out to almost blows, and I had to leave your office as you're trying to head coach an NFL team because we're arguing over. My thesis is that only you would argue with this. Logically, the only people you cannot play the games with are players. You fundamentally cannot play the game with any sort of players. And I said you could play them without coaches, and
that really pissed me off.
That's what pissed you off.
Coaches.
That's what pissed you off.
Without officials,
but you can't play
without players.
No, that's what it was. I said you could play without coaches, and that's what set the whole thing off. And I was like, well, hey, what about refs? And you're like, F those guys. You can play without. You can play without refs.
The heck with those guys. I didn't care for them anyway.
And so I said, well, now you're not being logical. Now you're being biased and emotional.
And you were setting me off about the whole thing. Yes, and I was
being sensitive.
I was very sensitive and very cranky when you said you could play without coaches.
Maybe the reason you were cranky was because the day before, on the ski slopes, you decided, because everything's got to be a competition with you. You decided you were going to race me and my brother, who's probably 9 years old, down the ski slopes.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, he was. That's how math works. I was 17.
No.
I was 17. He's 8 years younger, so he was only 9 years old. And you decided you were gonna beat us down, right? And you were using all that mass, you know, that mass, that girth.
I whooped you the first race down.
No, you warped us down, but right at the end of the slopes, if you remember, it intersected with the bunny slopes, and there are these little road bumps.
Moguls?
They're not moguls. They weren't about moguls. You ain't no mogul skier. They were speed bumps to slow you down from doing this and crashing into the kids. And you were still in a tuck, and you hit these speed bumps, and you flew 20 yards and landed on your ribs and broke 3 of your ribs.
I did.
And then had to go back to the office
the next day for you to come up with this stupid thing that we were talking about.
So you were probably a little salty.
I was.
But I was right. The only people you cannot play with is the players.
Little did I know
so if
how
you're making,
smart you were at that
time. If you're
time.
making billions and billions of dollars off of them, they should be making at least something.
Agreed.
Hey, but it's going to be a big game this week. Hey, whether you wear crimson and gray, whether you wear maize and blue, get loud, get hype. This is what college football is all about. We can't wait to watch it and cheer with you guys this week. Stick with us, because when we get back, we're going to talk inside of Denver prep. Welcome back to Come Get Some. I'm Blake Williams here with Mr. Come Get Some himself, Gregg Williams. And we're into talking a little Denver prep. And sorry, fans, sorry to let you know, it's hard in the NFL. And maybe when we were looking earlier in the season, maybe this was going to be a breather game coming off of back-to-back big bat games versus Baltimore and Pittsburgh. It's not. Sorry to tell you, this is going to be a hard out versus Denver. And so I know we were watching that game. We were watching that late game, but tell us a little bit about what you are seeing from Denver right now.
I've seen them respond just exactly how you and I both know Sean will demand them to respond. Sean is one of the best coaches I've ever had a chance to work with. What he's done and how he's building the morale and also building the disciplines behind the scenes, and what that defense has done to all of a sudden turn around, and how they're taking the ball away and doing a great job and helping the offense. But I will tell you this. It's taken a while, but Sean has done a very good job on how he's managed Russell to be as good of a Russell as he can be, similar to Drew Brees, on how that whole management was going on. This is going to be a very tough game.
It is, and I am. Would you agree with me that I think this is going to be a top 3 opponent in terms of how they're playing right now? Whack the records off on who they are and how they are playing right now and how they're situated right now versus us, that this is a top 3, hardest opponent we've faced on the year.
Right now, it's good for this to be on video that I'm actually agreeing with you. This is by far a top 3. I agree.
49ers, Baltimore, and then in Denver. The way I put Denver above Seattle in terms of the way they're playing right now.
I agree.
And look, and
they're playing well too.
And for the fans that maybe aren't seeing or haven't kept track of what Denver's doing, and the narrative that gets out there sometimes is a little different from what the reality is, and whatnot with the talking heads. We'll talk about sometimes, but it backs it up, right? I mean, the last 3 games, Denver's defense has taken it away 12 times.
Awesome.
5 times, and then the next week 4 times, and the next week 3 times. Right? And we lead the league in turnovers. Yep. Right? And we're getting way better.
We lead it, and we have to protect it. I know, on offense, our offense better understand, protect the ball.
And you mentioned it, Russell's back to playing at a Pro Bowl level, whether people realize it or not. I mean, he's completing 70% of his passes for 19 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Yep. All right, playing back at a Pro Bowl level. And in the last 5 games, they're 4-1. They got beat by Kansas City by 1 score. And then since then, over the last month, they've beaten Green Bay. Then they played Kansas City again, and they beat them by 3 scores. I mean, beat them 24-9, right? And then they beat Buffalo, and then and they beat Red Hot Minnesota, right? I mean, they're legit. And they gave up 181 points in the first 5 games, 181, including 70 points in that one game.
It could have been more.
It could have been more, right? Miami called off the Dogs finally at the end. They've only allowed 72 total points over the last 5 games
against good football teams and good offenses.
And you mentioned Sean a little bit, and so let's talk about how this has happened. We've spent so much time with Sean Payton, coaching with him for 3 years, winning a Super Bowl with him. Talk a little bit about Sean and Sean being off of that Bill Parcells tree, and from an insider who knows how Sean goes about coaching, game planning, kind of culture flipping, and even mid-season flipping. Like how has this happened, what you're seeing up there?
Sean was the very first coach in my career that I ever worked with, worked with, that was as meticulous of a note taker and as meticulous of a time management expert that I've ever been a part of. And he was very detailed about that. And Bill Parcells taught him that. Mm-hmm. And Bill Parcells taught him that at some point in times you do have to be a little bit angry. And you can't always be the nice guy coaching. And you can remember in a few of those staff meetings when all of a sudden he'd be jumping all everybody in the staff. And then he'd look at me and I say, I got it, Bill. And he'd go, Bill, what do you mean? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were acting like Bill Parcells. Okay, but it's actually Sean Payton. But those are the things he did. And all of that's being said and done is that you have to build everything through the meetings, through the practices, through the walkthroughs, and through everything. And that Bill Parcells culture has meant a lot to him. But Sean Payton has taken it light years past what Bill was doing and what he was doing when we were together. Okay, he's come a long way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the team is, and to that as well too. I mean, the team is different than it was those first 5 weeks.
Drastically different.
There's a lot of players that aren't either playing or aren't even on the team anymore from those first 5 games.
You betcha.
And he's the same way with coaches as well too. I mean, if he could replace, if you need to be replaced, he's going to replace you, but it's not going to be Einstein's definition of insanity where we're going to sit here and look at it like this is what the standards are, this is what the culture is, this train isn't stopping for anybody.
He lives by the standards, and he expects you to live by the standards. And you know what? Think about that. All the other people we've worked with that don't have a clue about how to be that way.
Well, here's another thing that's obviously a challenge when it comes to traveling, right? It's a mountain time zone. Mm-hmm. So not quite West Coast, but at least 2-hour time difference for us, from here. But then also the altitude. So what do you think going to Denver? Is it the time zone or is it the altitude? Which is more of a challenge?
Well, you know me and how detailed I've gone with all the studies behind the scenes and everything for years and years and decades and decades. By far, the altitude is the number one restrictor going there. So now altitude acceptance, the body's ability to accept that I'm at a different altitude, goes into the time reference, okay? And it's been proven that you need to be there on spot, having the altitude 48 hours, in between 48 and 72 hours before, and if you don't do that, then you show up on game day and go play. And let your body, do what it was doing, all that kind of stuff. But don't think that you can just do your normal 24 hours ahead of time. It's going to help you. It's not that way. And again, we live that, and we made them change. I made them change when I became the head coach here when we went up and played Denver.
No doubt. I mean, and you talk about that great 2018 game, when you were the head coach, I was the defensive coordinator here, and a lot of stuff goes into play with that as well, too, with the altitude of from a kicking standpoint, understanding where you can kick the ball further, right, up there. And so field goals, that's a great thing for us, right, where we're at right now with D-Hop, right? But that changes things, right? And so we talk about that game a little bit and how that game went and how that game ended, right? And we kind of knew that, right? I mean, it ended 17-16, and just playing the understanding of there at the end of the game, going for it down in the tight red zone, going for it, knowing that this was the only guarantee, right? We get it, first down, we kneel the clock out, game's over. We don't have to score another point. The game's already over. They don't have any timeouts left or anything, We don't get it.
We don't get it.
They've got to drive, and we know where they've got to drive to be able to kick the field goal. All right, a lot less variance and volatility than kicking off and all the other what ifs, right? And
as the head coach, I controlled the field position. I controlled where the ball is going to be punted. Oh, we're not doing it. No, we're going to go for it. And if we go for it and score, great. The game is done. It's over with. But now if we don't, we're going to make them have to go the longest distance possible. And as once they did that and they're coming up the field and all that kind of stuff, and then somebody that's related to Dad or whatever, that last series that we played right up there at midfield, just crossing midfield. Okay, it was first down, rushing coverage, second down pressure,
rushing.
third down pressure, fourth down pressure, and the third and the fourth down
We're
pressure
zero.
were cover zero, and Jabril Peppers
run
got
through
sacks
sack.
on both of them. But
Run through sack,
his second sack on fourth down was an adjustment you only talked to him about once on how he adjusted to protection to be able to block where he came from on the very first time on third down, and on fourth down he adjusted and listened to exactly what you said. Hey, Jabril, if you ever watch this show, it can't be that simple. Listen to your coach. Listen to your coach. It was a great game. It's one of my most fun games ever.
No doubt. Well, thank you very much. Stick right with us right here, and we'll be right back with our favorite Pay That Man segment after this. Welcome back to Come Get Some. This is our final segment, our wrap-up segment, our Pay That Man segment. But real quick, I wanted to shine a highlight on. I saw Peter Schrager, shine a highlight on Jimmy Donovan being at the game yesterday, and I saw our guy Jason McCourty. Shout out Brad Milan, the longtime head equipment trainer for the Browns today. And so I've got my Browns field crew. So I want to shout out, Chris Powell and his team. Chris is the longtime head field crew. And does a great job with everything, with the fields, keeping all the fields, the practice fields and everything, in great shape. And we're getting to that time of the year, right, where it's going to be dealing with ice and snow, and they work overtime. They work overnight to keep that snow off of it, to blow dry the fields and heat the fields, and hoping we have a big hoping that Chris and the guys have to work a lot of overtime this year in all through January, right? And have to figure out some new things that maybe they're not used to having to do as much, and that's part of an organization and culture. But pay that man his money. And so here's an interesting one, and we've been talking about this one, and his fifth-year option's already been picked up, but he plays a premier position, and he's been playing it premierly. But Tua Tagovailoa, and playing in the first ever Black Friday game this week.
It's a great one to add to the list because all of our guys are doing a fantastic job and need to be paid. But I believe he's done a fantastic job doing everything that he has to do to show his teammates, show ownerships, to win and stay healthy on the field. The most important thing now when you invest long-term in these quarterbacks is it's amazing amount of money that goes into those contracts, and you got to stay healthy. I do like the way that he is playing the game now because the clock in his head is doing a better job of not extending plays. So, Tua, I'd pay that man.
I would agree with that. And you talk about his head, and I think that's probably at that position and all the guaranteed money, that's probably one of the things you most have to be worried about is his health. He even talked about this offseason that he semi-contemplated retirement, this early retirement this offseason, but it sounds like everything's going well with him. He is definitely playing up to his draft status and his Heisman status. I would say pay that man as well too.
Pay that man, and you look at all the quarterbacks that have been hurt in this league, and he's playing injury free. He's doing a great job with it.
No doubt. So we got some big games this week. Thank you, Denver. All right, Denver and the Browns. All right, that's a 4:30 game and a big-time game with Ohio State in Michigan the day before. It's going to be a fun fall football get-after-it weekend.
Can't wait. And as we say, make sure everybody knows it's time to say, ready, break? Come get some!